Welcome, everyone, to a Sales Hacker live event. If you've attended one before and you're a Sales Hacker OG, welcome back. If this is your first time, you have chosen an incredible panel to come listen to. Thank you all so much for being here. So go down to your chat box while people are still rolling in. Tell us your name, your role, where you're tuning in from. We love to keep this super interactive, so talk to the other attendees. That's one of the super fun aspects of being live. And when you have questions for this panel, I know you're going to have a lot of them, so drop them in the Q&A. We don't want them to get lost in the chat, so check out the Q&A box, and then we're going to pull in those questions as we go. So today's topic is all about virtual selling and treating virtual selling as a skill, something that you need to train for. So we've got a really interesting stat that only 20% of B2B buyers say they want to return to in-person sales. So, regardless of where the seller is, B2B buyers want that virtual selling experience. So we have an incredible, really amazing panel to talk with about the skills that are necessary to give buyers that experience that they want. We've got Matt Davis, sales director at TouchCast. He specializes in virtual events. So he's got some really exciting perspective on how to take these skills from in-person events and transition them into the world of virtual selling. We've got Nick Capozzi, founder of Sales Pitching, who is really an expert in sales presentations and the skills that you need for those presentations in the virtual world. And Bob Basselier, who's got a bit of a different perspective as a VP of sales for account management at Allego. So he'll be speaking to, building relationships, rapport, and applying these virtual skills across existing accounts. So I'm really excited for you to meet all of them. And before we jump in with a round of introductions, just a huge shout out to Allego for sponsoring this panel. The topic of virtual selling is just so fitting because Allego is a sales enablement platform that uses tech to set teams up for success, combining that learning, content, collaboration into one app. So let's get started. Thank you all for spending this hour with us. Bob, I'm going to start with you. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, what you're passionate about?
Sure. Thanks, Sam. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I am the VP of Account Management at Allego, as Sam said. Been here for 2 years. I spent the prior 20 years of my career at a Boston-based technology firm called EMC, which was subsequently acquired by Dell. I brought Allego into EMC back in 2015, fell in love with the platform, and as they say, had to find my way into this company to be able to do this every day. I am Boston native, live outside of Boston. Nick called me out on it. All Boston sports are my passion, as well as other things. But I'm speaking to you from mid-coast Maine, where I spend a lot of time in the summer fishing and golfing up here. So welcome, and really happy to be here with everybody.
Love that. Thanks so much, Bob. Nick, I'd love to hear from you.
Hey everyone, how you doing? My name is Nick Capozzi, originally from Montreal, Canada. And Bob, if you can't find the Stanley Cups, it's because they're all in Montreal, just FYI. But I live in Phoenix, Arizona now because there's no snow. I have kind of a unique background. I'm a trained broadcaster. I worked in radio and television for quite a while. And then one day that transitioned to working in the cruise industry. And I taught people how to do live sales presentations and sales presentation skills. So that's what I do. I sit in a lot of demos and I help people kind of get over, their fears of selling virtually and, what the messaging is and how to say it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you get that $1 million voice. I can hear it. Now it all makes sense.
Last but absolutely not least, Matt, will you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Matt Davis. I'm based here in Chicago. I have no clue what they're talking about when they're talking about hockey and all that stuff. I'm originally from Indianapolis, so we don't have hockey or baseball. But I work at a company called TouchCast. We're a virtual events and communications platform, and we put on these spectacularly, really, really cool and engaging events for our customers. And I've spent the last 20 years in some sort of a selling or sales management role. I have done an enormous amount of coaching on, creating experiences for the other person so that you can eventually, not to use a really ridiculous catchphrase, but you really want to sit on the same side of the table with them. And so I think a lot of the techniques we're going to talk about today is beyond just virtual selling. And so I'm really excited to be here with this. Bob and Nick are great. And Sam, happy to be here with you.
Thanks so much, Matt, and thank you all for being here. I'd love to just start out a bit high level importance of virtual selling, and I know that you're all very passionate about treating virtual selling as a skill that you train for. So, Nick, I would love to just get your perspective on that to kick us off.
Sorry, repeat the question, Sam. I was taking notes. I was taking a note to get Matt a Chicago Blackhawks jersey, so just was caught up.
I love that. So the question is just, why is it so important that we treat virtual selling as a skill that needs to be trained for?
Well, it's really easy. It's because this is the world we live in now, right? So it's an absolute necessity. And frankly, it was important before, even before COVID. I used to use a lot of different techniques to sell virtually just because we couldn't be everywhere that we needed to be. And I think what's really engaging is that, or what's really interesting is that, when we talk about virtual or we talk about video or we talk about kind of these Zoom boxes we live in now, I try to get people to get away from the idea of, okay, it's video. Video is just the medium. What the real technique is engagement skills, right? And if you can teach people to be engaging and just a little bit charismatic and make them more confident, what's going to happen is the person on the other end is going to pay a lot more attention to them. So, obviously it's the world we live in now. There is no going back. We are not going back to, there'll be some hybrid, but not like it was. So the sooner people are able to master this and understand these skills and strategies to get out there to use them, the more effective they'll be.
I want to jump in on key in on one thing you said. So this isn't new. And we've been doing, virtual selling, a long time before the pandemic. And I think it's really interesting. I think people are like, "Oh my gosh, we have to do this." It's like, yeah, this is the predominant medium now. But all of the selling that we used to do is, there's so many different ways. You're doing it, over email. You're doing it over phone. We were using Zoom or WebEx, and before then. So I think it's really interesting. I wanted to going back to the importance piece. So I've been at TouchCast for about 6 weeks, and again, we put on virtual events and hybrid events. And one of the biggest learnings I had, just as I've started talking to customers, is they say there's this kind of idea that, well, if it's in person, it's like there's all this preparation you have to do, and there's all these things that you have to just be ready for. And I was, I was kind of probably in the same camp, but what I've learned is that, that amount of work you have to do to be ready for a virtual event is literally almost the same, if not sometimes more. And that is such a good analogy, or that's such a good parallel to selling, right? I think a lot of sellers have gone from, okay, well, I can kind of wing it when I go in person, or maybe I do a little bit because I have to book travel and all this other stuff. But when I go on virtual, I can just kind of jump on, and because we're doing this. And I think what we're going to touch on is just like that's just not the case, and there is a lot that you have to be ready for when you do this type of selling.
Matt, I'm curious, just given your expertise in the space and that you do this every day, when it comes to virtual events, how do you keep the attendees engaged, right? Because again, these are going to go on, I assume, for multiple days at a time. How do you keep it invigorating and engaging so that they're constantly paying attention like they would be at a live event?
Well, I think you'll have a good understanding of this. You treat it like TV. So, you think about how TV keeps people engaged, different camera angles, different visuals that are happening within it, a feeling of togetherness and feeling like you're part there, you're in the room. And so that's kind of our approach. And I think the engagement for this world when you're selling is kind of the same thing, as you treat it like, you're getting ready for it to go on TV. And so that's kind of what I've seen, and that's what I've seen work really well.
Matt, I think that the connection between how events changed and how selling process changed is a really good way to start this conversation. I remember back in first half of 2020, so many companies had to focus on how are we now going to pull off a virtual kickoff. People had really never done that. They'd certainly done some virtual events, to your point, but never a virtual kickoff that had to be experiential and had to touch every one of those salespeople, be motivational, be culture rich, all those things. I think what they didn't know then that hit sort of after those first half kickoffs was that you almost have to create that experience for the buyer every day as a seller today. It can't just be the in-person quality that we used to produce when we used to go see customers to be face-to-face. Now it's got to be all the prep, all the quality and capability in the meeting, and then all the post-meeting follow-up and information sharing that I think, we talked a little bit about this in the earlier conversation. I don't know, we might have gotten a little bit lazy about prep and about post-meeting capabilities prior to being forced into this. And now those skills are critical.
Yeah. Well, Nick, you're the expert in that. So how are you helping your customers prep and get ready to put on a good experience for their customers or prospects?
Well, I think what's interesting, just given my background coming from the cruise industry, which was the most B2C environment that exists essentially, when I first kind of got into this space, I was caught off guard with the B2B and just kind of the lack of rapport building and how, when I would talk to companies, they would shut that down immediately. But I think there is something that we're still talking to people. And, I think, Matt, you brought it up before we even started this conversation today. You're walking into people's homes, right? So there's that aspect of some level of vulnerability. Right now, you are in my personal space. So how do you make them as comfortable as possible? One of the things I really like to do, and it doesn't always work, but to prepare, because being prepared obviously is so critical, is I'll spend a lot of time. Well, I'll spend 2 minutes. I budget 2 minutes before any conversation to go through someone's LinkedIn profile, and I'm looking for little nuggets of gold, little things that maybe I can start a conversation off of. When Bob first got on, I caught that Boston accent or a little subtle bit of it. Out of the gate. So obviously I'm going to veer down that road. And we talked hockey immediately, and there was something there. He may have shut that down, and I would have just gone, okay, let's spin over to the agenda. But I think preparing, understanding we're talking to people, finding unique things. Here's a great one. Mutual connections on LinkedIn. So we assume it's always industry people, right? But I can't tell you how many times that I'll go through and I'll be, hey, Matt, do you actually know? And one of the biggest meetings I was ever in, or led to one of the biggest meetings I ever got, was the initial conversation I had was with someone who was connected to my brother-in-law. And I said, hey, do you actually know my brother-in-law? And they were like, oh my gosh, yeah, I worked with him for 5 years. He's amazing. So I had never met this person, but they took all the positive characteristics of my brother-in-law and superimposed it onto me. So that changed the whole dynamic of the conversation. And the way that I look at it, if you're selling a widget, you're one of 10 companies that are selling the same widget to the same buyer. So I'm always trying to build a champion on their side. And people buy from people they like. And people like people who like them. So the more granular I can get with getting to know someone and, shining the light on them and making it their story, that's, in my experience, the most effective way to make that work.
Do you guys care if we stay on prep for a minute? Just to kind of, because I think it's really important, and I want to
Sure.
go. Bob, I'd love to hear about what are you? Because I also think not only do we get a little bit lazy when we were doing in person, but also when you're working with customers and you start to get to know them, sometimes that prep, they kind of go, I know them, it's fine, and then a new person comes in. So I'd love to hear how you're handling the preparation for this type of thing for your existing customers.
Yeah, some of the really innovative things. I make the point, too, that this, as we're talking about these skills, these are not the core selling skills that even your most experienced people learned 20 years ago. We're talking about new skills. So when we talk to enablement professionals or sales learning professionals, we're making the point, and they get it by now, believe me, everybody gets it. This is a new skill set, and this is not innate. Not inherent in the way that salespeople came up through whatever selling experience, whatever industry, whatever processes they have been taught in the past. These are new skills, and they need to be taught. And the people that are hugging their ability to do things the same way they've always done them, but just do them on Zoom, going to be left behind. if they haven't already been left behind. So as it relates to preparation, we have sellers on the Allego platform, and there are other platforms that do this. But Allego, one of the things that it was grounded in is the very unique capability to create and share bite-sized video simply and easily. Now, prior to doing this in a virtual selling realm, that was always important for learning, for sales collaboration. We applied it to coaching and other things. It exploded last year as a natural extension to the way that people virtually sell. And here's an example of how. If I'm getting on a meeting tomorrow with 5 people, and I might know them all well, what would I have done in the past? If I was going to go to see them, maybe I'd send them an agenda in email before the meeting and say, hey, this is what we've sort of talked about. Hope we can accomplish this. What if today, now I'm not going to be with them, I could send them a 1-minute video. Say, I'm looking forward to meeting tomorrow. Here's what I have in mind based on all the work we've done in the past month together. And and I can voice over an agenda, then come back to myself and say, I'm really looking forward to meeting on Zoom. We're going to do this for 1 hour. It's going to be a great productive session. Thanks for taking the time. The personalization that Nick is talking about has to get beyond just research and instant connection, because the only thing I'd challenge about people doing business with people they like is that I really believe people do business with people they trust. I have a lot of people I like that I wouldn't do business with, but I've always done business with people I trust, and I think that's what the new norm is. That's what sellers have to be in any experience with customers today. So as it applies to account management versus a single deal or new logo sell, let's say, it's all relationship building. It's building the network of people within that customer that you need to interact with to be successful. And we use video prep before meetings. We do video wrap up after meetings, and we can create those and share those just like you would write an email and share an email. It's that simple.
That's cool.
And I think what's interesting is I deal with a lot of sales enablement leaders, and one of the things I do a lot of is I'll create sales training content for companies. And the one thing that I'm constantly being asked for right now is confidence on camera, and how to take messaging and get it tighter and shorter. And it's interesting what you said, Bob, about a 60-second video. You actually want to be no longer than 45 seconds. So that's kind of the sweet spot. That's the average. If you have someone interested, engaged, you got 45 seconds to get them intrigued into what you're talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree. Everything we do is based on short form rather than these old long videos that used to take people through messaging or take people through positioning or market updates. No one's listening for very long, so you better get it done quickly.
No, and you're right. And it's funny. I got into a debate with a CRO from a company, and he was saying, "I don't watch video from salespeople." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because they're 3 minutes." I said, "Exactly. That's why you don't watch. You want 45 seconds, right?" So I think that's interesting. There's a lot of ways to use video effectively in a virtual selling world.
Yeah. One of the things that I've done with various teams or my colleagues in the past when thinking about the modern seller is, it's being like Sherlock Holmes. And like I love the idea that, he's not just the world's greatest detective because he can solve the crime. He understands all the clues. He knows how to piece all the things together. He knows how to eliminate suspects. He knows how to, pull more people in and see the things that other people can't see. And, I think that there's a level of that type of ongoing preparation, discovery, qualification, all of that. And, kind of bringing it back to why we're all together, which is this virtual selling format, which is you have access to our people, to our customers and our prospects like you've never had before, right? You have access from where they're at, in our homes. You have access because you can get in contact with them so much quicker. Just like the buyer mentality has changed so much as well. And, I can't stress enough that as a first component of being incredibly gifted at virtual selling, it all starts off camera. And so, Bob, I know you were talking to us earlier, and I love what you said about front When you
Front stage and backstage.
backstage. Bring that up.
Yes.
I love.
So let's provoke a little, see if we can get some questions rolling here. The analogy that I gave, and it was in a book authored by a couple of our two founders called Mastering Virtual Selling, but it was based on an actual experience. And what it basically is that if the salesperson is orchestrating a relationship with decision makers and buyers in any situation, some of what they do is backstage, and it's some of the things we've already talked about: preparation, post-meeting, what am I wrapping up with, what am I sharing, what am I sending for follow-up, what additional information needs came out of a meeting that I am then providing later. All the work that's done before and after meetings is backstage. And front stage is this. It's the experience that we give people we're dealing with when we are on a face-to-face, but now virtual meeting. And understanding that front stage and backstage in any orchestration, both elements are critical. And as that's developed over the past couple of years, and we've been very close to that, most of the research will say that backstage is about 60% of any modern salesperson's time today, and 40% is front stage, which is time spent face-to-face in some web medium with the customer. So that requires different skills, certainly, as we've said, different tools, and different techniques than we were using 24 months ago.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, Sam, we just had a question came in. We've got a question. Let's run with it.
Yeah, we do. Where in an outbound sequence do you recommend a salesperson use video? Is it effective at the first touch? I love that. What stage of the funnel should we be bringing in video selling?
All of them.
Yeah. I would say, if it's good and if it's like thoughtful and if it's short, and then I'd say, yeah, as a first touch, I think that's great. And I think to Nick's point, as much as we can, right? Like get to know the human, put something out there. There's also something, which is crazy, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but we have phones as well, which is actually still pretty effective medium. Is when you you're thoughtful and you think about what you want to put in that. But Nick, like, what makes a great, like, all right, I'm going to get your attention, and it's not a cheesy sales thing.
Hook, story, offer.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Classic, but it works. You know what? And you may need to pull me down out of this rabbit hole, okay? Because I can talk on this particular subject all day, but I'll just throw some numbers out at you. 3% of sellers use video in the sales process, and the ones that do almost exclusively do in prospecting.
Not people on the Lego platform, Nick.
No, I know.
All 3% are Lego users.
Well,
That's
exactly.
a really low percentage, man. Not the people I deal with every day.
No, but see, we get snowblind to that, Bob.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting, and it also depends on who's seeing it. So a few things that I use it in when I'm prospecting is always make sure I use Vidyard or Loom or BombBomb. There's a bunch of different examples out there that are fantastic, but I'll always put in brackets personal video, and then what the subject line is, so they know it's personalized. Now, if we're selling tech to tech, people for 2 or 3 years, they've been seeing that before. But there's different verticals where people are like, oh my gosh, you just sent me a personalized video? Wait, stop the presses. Second thing is, especially on an introduction video, I'm aiming for 18 to 20 seconds. I just have my own data that I kind of go through that supports that. So I'm going for something really tight or something hooky, like a belief buster, then a quick story. And I think the mistake a lot of sellers make in this phase is that it's always about them. It's about my solution. It's I and me and us and we. And one of the things I really learned last year and has been incredibly effective is making the client the hero of the story. It's more of, hey, Matt, have you ever dealt with this as a virtual seller? Is this a problem you've come across? Not a great belief buster, but, making the story about them, catching them off guard with something different. And those are 2 real effective ways to use video. I'll tell you my favorite way to use video is actually when I'm sending a proposal. And the reason is I'll always attach like a PDF with, the actual written out proposal, but I'll always do a recap, a 45-second recap. And what's interesting about that, the most I ever had was 40 unique users inside of a company watching the proposal recap video. So that means I now had access to 40 people in this company who are either stakeholders or who are going to use this product, now seeing it, and me getting 45 seconds with them to really hammer home my point. And that's what's great about some of these video tools, is that you can actually track unique users. You can track how many views. And I'll even go, I'm in a sales cycle right now with someone, and I set a video 2 days ago, it's had 1 view. 2 days later, it's had 5. So I know they went back to what I was talking about to kind of re-engage with that. So now it opens up the door that, well, tomorrow now is a good opportunity for me to go back because they've spent a couple, they've gone through it a few more times. So
yeah, what's great about the new technology, Nick, as you're saying, is that you might send it to 5, but in most of these technologies, like a Lego and others, I can see if someone forwarded on to someone else and who they are and where they are. So this, this viral effect that the videos can have is tremendous. And the reason that in our case, we've combined it with our learning, content management, coaching, and virtual selling platform is that a lot of the content that I might want to include in that video, I can pull in. It can appear up here. They can click on it and see that, or they can click on it and see me. I'm not attaching anything anymore. It's all in one experience, and I can get a lot done in Nick's recommended 45 seconds if I have capabilities to draw video, to draw content from all the other sources that I have within a Lego. I'll do one better. The new technology, for people who are saying, so much technology, how do I use it all? The new technology is digital sales rooms, as Gartner has coined that segment of the industry. So digital sales rooms as they exist in a Lego. I create a sales room. I invite very securely group of 2 to 50 people, however many people are in that. If I'm a medical device rep in one of the large med device sales companies that we do business with, they might have a group of 50 doctors that they bring into their digital sales room. Now, rather than sending a video that I'm bolting onto an email, they're simply sending a room that everyone can chat within, collaborate within, get access to all content, all proposals, all historical meeting recordings if they want to include those. They can curate additional content, everything within one place rather than email hell going back and forth now that we're all remote. It is exploding within our customer base as a key new technology use. And that is an example of a skill that salespeople need to understand how to use. Nobody's used it before.
Hey, Bob, give me a second. I'm just on a lego.com. I'm just requesting a demo. This is interesting.
There you go. Good.
I love this. I would love to hear, and it looks like you're already jumping into it, Matt, but just some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to selling with video and some of the mistakes people are making so we can learn from those as well.
So I was just making sure we answered the user's question, and I think we did. I think we said that, I think the key is not necessarily the when, it's the what and the substance and how you think about it. But so do's and don'ts, I gotta default to Bob or Nick on that one. For the video kings.
Bob, I'm curious what yours are.
Yeah, just give my experience with it has been this. I've seen a lot of them, and we're coaching our people how to be good at these. I think there's a little bit of a tendency to make them so personalized that they almost become a little bit gimmicky. So we've seen people using our platform to easily record from their phone and quickly send a video with some content attached, but they're standing outside of, I don't know, to the conversation Nick and I were having earlier, outside Fenway Park, or they're standing outside of, a football game just before they're about to walk in, and they're trying to create a little bit of experience for that customer and have them get inside of them a little bit and what they like to do. I like that, but I've seen some of those go a little too far. So I think there's a balance between we're business people and we're talking to business people, and the kind of commercialization or the consumerization of how we use video when we're in those business situations. There's some line. I've seen people cross it. I've seen people be really creative and do a great job with it, but there's something there. I'm not an expert in that. Maybe Nick probably has a lot more to say.
Well, it depends on the goal. And Bob, I'm with you. I've seen people do like TikTok style videos, which is you want to have some level of elevation. I'll give you just some real granular tricks that I use. And this is based on me going into my own data on videos that I send out. One thing is I'm always using a white background. And the reason is I convert at a 20% higher rate of my own videos when the background's white and I'm wearing dark monochromatic colors. I want all attention on me and what I'm talking about. But what I think what's interesting, the biggest speed bump people deal with is just a lack of confidence, right? So I always tell people, if you're going to do one thing, light yourself well. So I have two $35 soft boxes tilted off webcam right here. So simple, so basic, literally $70 worth of lighting and a $38 webcam. Ideally, you want to have your webcam about 10 degrees above your eye, tilted down towards you. And if you do that, you're going to look good, right? And if you feel that you look good, you're going to be more confident in what you're presenting. That's the first thing. Second thing is whether it's a generic kind of 30-second piece you go through, or if you're getting a little bit more specific, I always say talk from a place of knowledge. So never, I always tell people use a script until you don't need that script anymore, until you have it memorized like your national anthem, up, down, left, right, and then just have bullet points. And if you're talking off bullet points and you know what the back end information is, you're going to come across as way more authentic, way more engaging. And if you're authentic, to Bob's point earlier, Bob buys from people he trusts, as everyone else does. So the more authentic you are and come across. And then the last thing is, where people stall. And I was in this conversation this morning, someone saying, I was trying to send a 2-minute video and it took me 45 minutes. Just send it. Ums and ahs are okay. That's natural, right? Just make sure you're giving really good insight that's about them. And if it's possible that it's actionable, that's even better. Give them something that they can literally stop the video and take away and apply, or give them a direction. So I'm going to turn off this video. I'm going to request a demo with a Lego right after this.
So you would kind of inadvertently, I don't know, there was a question in here that said, how do you quickly create personalized videos where the creation doesn't completely consume your time? And you kind of answered that. But I wanted to go, I think what was so cool about what you said is the first of all, the detail you're putting into your setup, right? And making sure that you look good and you don't look grainy and your internet's good and all that. And it reminded me of when I was a little bit younger, we would do these almost like drills where we would go into a conference room and everything would be broken. And you'd have to still maintain a great conversation while you couldn't set up the projector and you couldn't get connected to their internet. And it was and you would throw anything you could possibly imagine. A chair breaks and it was awful. It was a terrible experience, but it made us so good when we would go, because that always inadvertently happened. Well, I think that the same type of preparation and thought process for technology and the things that we're using, especially live, is so important. And I'll give you a really embarrassing example where I was working with a champion and she was incredible. And she was like, well, one of the things we're going to need to do is we're going to need to really impress this other team. Right. And we were really close and I'm thinking, I'm going to nail this. This is going to be great. And then it ended up being and I was really good at Zoom. It was the second time I'd ever used Microsoft Teams. And I found out the morning of that we had to use that. And so we went on Microsoft Teams. I had no idea the whole thing, and it was a disaster. And I think they felt bad for me. So we ended up working together. But, I do want to stress that there's a technology preparation aspect that happens when you go this, and so be ready and understand what the customer's using, what they prefer. That's a great question to ask them. What do you prefer? How do you like to do this? Some people can't use Zoom because they got corporate firewalls. But what are you guys thinking about some other do's and don'ts of the live, once we get the meeting and we're there? What are you seeing that's working really well or not?
Bob, what do you got going on?
Well, I think a lot of the Zoom skills or web conference skills that I saw companies go through early last year when that became a necessity have held. I think people have done pretty good. Nick, you mentioned a few of them: lighting, voice intonation, where's your face on the screen. There's been a real perfection of how to do that right, and you see various applications of that, and there are also different beliefs. We've heard from TV coaches who would say, your personalized background is good. Let people see it. It makes them more comfortable seeing you on camera where they maybe never have before. There's all sorts of different levels of skills that people have probably gravitated toward, but the meeting preparation makes the meeting, as it always has, and use of multimedia within those meetings is always going to be a really good thing. But I think, Matt, where you were headed with what used to make a good meeting in a conference room, some of those same things apply. We still need slides that don't have too much information on them. We still can't have too many slides. We still need to make sure that, we're focused on the customer, not ourselves. There's all kinds of things that have carried over. There's probably just a lot more focus on it when we're in this situation than if we were in a room together and there was lots of other stimulus that was distracting us. But there's no distractions in this situation.
100%.
I think it's a good too. I think that it'd be interesting to get your guys' opinion, because I have not. If you're thinking about just creating a really good video experience, going through a presentation, unless it's like got some of the most amazing animation, and it's like 2 words on it. I tend to not give presentations over video, and I use them as a good follow up or a lead behind. What are your guys' thoughts there?
So from my point of view, I always love to have, a deck at the ready, but one that I can jump around in. And just because I spend so much time kind of sitting in on companies' demos, one of the things that I see, and it's almost universal, is just a lack of discovery, right? I'm going in and I'm forcing exactly what I think the solution you need is onto you. Whereas if you do really good discovery and you ask, poignant questions and start to dig out their whys, right? And my favorite one is like, why now? Well, because we're looking at a few different but why today? What happened that drove this to be? Well, you know what happened? Actually, the VP of sales every 3 months gets upset about this. And I'm like, I get it. Bob gets upset about that. I'm just kidding, Bob. But then you take that and you can kind of pluck on that. And I find so many people are so rigid going into their demos and exactly how it lays out, as opposed to just thinking of it more as a conversation. And Bob, I just want to touch on something you said earlier about the video. So I will use this type of setup for that initial conversation, but having that, where you actually live, that realism. If I was having a meeting, I would have a background like what Matt has. I'm like, oh, Matt, where'd you get that lamp? I actually need a lamp just like that, because that will allow that kind of personalization. But when I'm sending out something, for the first time, I want them to be focused on exactly what I'm trying to relate to them.
I love that.
Good.
I want to jump in quickly with a question from the audience. Are you seeing sales cycles reduce as a result of the new tools and the new engagement in this environment? Bob, I might pass this to you.
Interesting question. I think my answer is I wish that I were seeing that, but I don't think so. I don't think it's been discernible yet that the cycles are shorter. Buyer behavior has definitely changed. And I think it's logical to think that way. Maybe we can be more effective with any of the interaction we're having, because so much of it is focused on tighter pre-meeting, tighter meetings, tighter post-meeting. Maybe it changes the whole cycle a bit. I think it's a really good thought, really good question. We haven't seen it yet, though.
Yeah, I'd say sales cycles are kind of like zebras. No two are the same, and they don't generally change their stripes. It's kind of we haven't seen anything yet either.
I will say in kind of more transactional clients that I have, I've definitely seen a little bit of an uptick, you know, if you can get people excited to buy in that moment. But I definitely understand if you got a longer sales cycle. But I think what's also great is that if you started to build this relationship, when I do a follow-up, even if, you know, if I'm on a 9-month cycle and I'm following up, you know, 6 weeks in just to touch base for, you know what, actually I found this really interesting white paper I thought might be interesting. I'll still send it as a video, right? So again, they're constantly seeing me, and they're on some level subconsciously building a relationship with me.
Yeah.
I love that.
Hey, Sam, one of the things I wanted to introduce at some point, and now's a good time, is not knowing the profile of everyone that's out there. One of the things we saw immediately with the use of video sharing and content sharing embedded in video, perhaps, compliance officers immediately questioned the ability of their sellers to do that, particularly in financial services and in any one of the medical fields, life sciences, and even med device. And the reason is because they have very tight regulations around what information can be shared, what can be said about products. There's huge liability risk in some of these industries to allow salespeople who might not have a governor on them in terms of what they're about to say about a product or about the market or about particular success that some other customer might have had or not. And there was really good reason for that, and it did stall some of the best sales thinking and even enablement thinking around use of virtual selling techniques that included video, or sometimes even just including allowing salespeople to send out any form of content directly to the customer. Now, we all said logically, if I can send an email, why can't I send something using one of these new tools? And the answers were often emails get screened. Emails go through compliance processes before they get shared. So I'll tell you, 18 months later, the answer almost universally has been that compliance officers have gotten much more business friendly. They understand, to the guy's points, that we're not going to come out of this tomorrow. And if we ever come out of this completely, we're going to wind up in this hybrid arena. And there's a lot of really effective ways that we can now sell without me going to Logan Airport in Boston every Monday morning at 6:30 and boarding a plane and, you know, touring the country. So the fact that we're going to be able to do this now, companies are saving money with virtual selling. Companies are more effective with virtual selling. To the attendees' question, are sales cycles possibly going to shorten? Maybe. So why all those great business reasons, compliance officers in some of the largest asset managers, largest med device and life sciences companies are coming around to say, this isn't just a new way of selling, it's a new way of doing business. It's not just sales transformation, it's digital transformation that's hitting all these companies, and they're figuring it out. There are new compliance and approval processes. They're bending the way they used to think for what's changed.
Yeah, 100% on that, Bob. And, you know, I'll tie that into what Desmond mentioned here, is that the hurdle of using videos, you still have to send it via email. Actually, probably, I'm ballparking here, probably only about 25% of the videos I send out are via email. Most of them are via social media and occasionally by text message. I'll never text someone unless I have permission to text them. It's usually in a follow-up situation. But using it with LinkedIn, and I'll always it's so easy to customize a thumbnail. People used to use whiteboards, but there's apps where you can say, you know, hi Matt, how are you? So that they know it's directed towards them. Or I'll write in the text portion of the LinkedIn message, you know, this isn't a generic video, it's a genuine hello from me to you. And that's been very effective for me. So I think there's a lot of ways. Yeah, you can.
Desmond, not in a Lego commercial, but if you're using a digital sales room, you don't have to use the 8 different technologies that you're thinking about you got to use to try to get that video to the customer. You set up this room. It's not a static microsite. It is a very interactive site. Customer does not need a license to get access to it. You distribute content, curate content to individuals very, very securely. Video and anything else stays within that room, and everyone has access that you want to. So you got to check out the new technologies, because you're not recording things, you know, on an iPhone and saving the file and converting it, getting it into your system, and then sending it via email. There's about 18 more clicks than you need in that scenario than using a modern selling tool like a Lego. And there are others, but things have changed.
And I'm gonna tie into that, because one of the best things you can do is take a piece of curated content. People are always looking for an excuse to follow up with their prospect. And if I'm using a Lego and I'm able to take a piece of content and share it out of that platform, I mean, that's fantastic, because it's, hey, Sam, you know what? I thought of you. I was reading this and I thought of you, and it kind of tied into that conversation you and I had. So that's great. And Desmond, I'm going to challenge you here. You're saying that it's not good for new prospects. It's more for account maintenance. Yeah, it's great for account maintenance, but personally for my business, every reach out I have is using, this kind of technology. So it's actually really good. Depends on who you're selling for or selling to, pardon me. Like I said, in tech, people have kind of seen this before, but there's so many different spaces where people haven't at all. Right? You'd be surprised how many times people email me. They're like, no one has ever sent me a personal video. I'm like, okay, great. Good start.
Well, so I only do new logos, and I've only done new logos for the last, 5-6 years. And, we're talking right now a lot about, how to get someone's attention really into prospecting. But I think this medium, video selling for new logo selling, is actually wildly effective. And it goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier, which is, done well, it is a way that you can get that trust pretty quickly. So you have a much shorter time to the first meeting, I found, because back in the day we used to have to say, hey, can I come on out? When does it work for you? Can I book travel? You can have increased frequency, so you can have more conversations, faster follow-up. And I think you can create some pretty unique experiences. Like when we were in person, or on the phone, you can't see someone, but in person, you kind of had, there was the walk, there was you sit there in the conference room or in the waiting room, and then, they'd be late, and then you'd get to do a little bit of a walk, and then you'd set up the conference room, and then you do this, and then, then you walk out, and then that's kind of it, where there's a lot of it's just so much more efficient when you do the video selling and when you're on video. And so I found it to be a very quick way, or a much faster way, to get into that process and to run that process. But the reason that it hasn't improved necessarily the length of the sales cycle, in my personal opinion, is because money's just become a lot tighter. Because we just have there's a lot more products out there, and there's a lot of, everyone's kind of coming out of the pandemic, and procurement is much tighter, and so there's so many factors to it that continue to drag it out. But I'd love to know, kind of on the video selling front, Bob and Nick, like, what are some of the don'ts? What are some of the mistakes you see people make?
Curious for Bob's take here.
Is this just, Matt, sorry, using video again?
Just video selling, like live video selling, like having a call like we're having right now. Like, what are some
we're having right now?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think people had to get good at it quick. I think there are still, to Nick's earlier point, there are still people who just haven't adapted to the needs of good lighting, good voice intonation, some of the basic things that get heightened on calls like this that didn't need to be quite as tight when we were sitting in the conference room, and there were more stimulus around us. I haven't seen a lot of people stumble with this lately. I think the companies that we're doing business with have done a good job of setting up sales studios, and in that they've invested in technology, sent it to people's homes, their sellers' homes, made sure that people have lighting, have different cameras if that's what's needed, have different microphones and speakers if that's what's needed. So we've seen a lot of companies take charge of this on behalf of their sellers, not leave it up to the sellers individually, and say, this is the norm, this is how we will do things when we run a video meeting.
Bob, I'm curious your take on this, because this is one of the things I run into a lot. And I came up with, when I taught people how to sell, I wanted them to know their scripts, right? Because again, if you're talking from a place of knowledge, you're going to be more credible. I didn't want it to sound mechanical, which is why I'd always let them scripting and then go to bullets. But probably about half the companies I deal with or people I talk to don't have any scripting. They're like, okay, sit in on this guy's demo and go ahead. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I come from your camp, Nick. I'm all about being on message. I mean, I think people can adapt the message, but if we're all saying different things, we're probably confusing customers. So I'm a huge believer in formalized message training and making sure that we coach, that we in our platform, people routinely have sellers that go through their message, video gets sent to their manager. There's all kinds of AI built into this process now, but the virtual coach can listen for things and find things in the scripting that are good and bad, and can point the manager to those sections of maybe a 15-minute message delivery that they need to go coach on. And then the coaching is very interactive and asynchronous within something like a Lego, because if Sam sent me 15-minute version of a new message that we needed her to learn, I could go through that in pretty short period of time, because the system's telling me where I need to go to listen for keywords if I've asked it to listen for keywords. And then I can respond either with a short video to say, Sam, you were perfect in the opening. You need to work on this next stage of the message a little bit because you stumbled a little bit when we went into this next stage. Or I can write that, or I can record that with my voice, the feedback. So what the other thing that has been driven in this environment is asynchronous, or ability for me to learn, communicate, give feedback, coach, do all these things when I am available to do those. And it might be a different time than when my seller is available if I'm in a coaching scenario, for example. So everything's asynchronous. Everything can be responded to and interacted with in these new platforms, and it is just really vital that you take advantage of that, because we cannot be on Zoom 9 hours a day.
See, there's parts of what you both said that I agree with. Yes, you have to be on message, and yes, you have to, can't have everyone saying the wrong thing. I am very anti-scripts, and the reason is I think the buyer has become way smarter. I think they can sniff those out really quickly. And one of the things that I think has worked really, really well for me and for some of my colleagues and teams is that it's more like a Curb Your Enthusiasm. You have like the key points that you have to make every single time, because that's how people want. Like, I want the buyer to walk away thinking the three things, whatever those three things that we've sales and marketing have come up with. I think people get really they get too dependent on a script, and they stop thinking. They don't use their brain on how to interact. And when we've got these forums and these formats where we're literally in each other's houses, you gotta improv, and there has to be a little bit of an improv with some key points, key takeaways.
So, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Sam? Should we get to some of the questions, or do we go to 2 CT or?
Yes, we are getting close to the end of our time. It looks like some folks are chatting back and forth in the chat, but yeah, I would love if there's any pieces that any of you feel like we've missed or would want to touch on before we go. I just want to make sure that we have time for those final thoughts. Nick, did you have anything you were about to jump in with?
Well, I don't have time to knife fight Matt about script versus non-script. I'm just kidding. Actually, this is something interesting. So this is one thing I'm getting way more of is video content, but for customer success. And I'm just wondering, Bob, what are you seeing in that space right now?
Video content. Say more about that next. Video content used by customer success teams.
Correct. Yeah, that's one now, because that's it used to be just sellers for me, but now I have customer success managers for me to kind of coach on that same thing.
Yeah, no, I think it is everyone adjacent to the seller, either pre or post sale. I think we see pre-sales engineers, we see post-sales consultants and implementers, and certainly in our business as well, customer success is a massive part of the customer relationship. The sellers and the customer success people are peers in the relationship and business management for that customer. So yeah, customer success can make use of video just as effectively as the quota carrying salesperson.
Huge missed opportunity. And I'm kidding,
Yeah.
Matt. I'm not
Yeah.
going to fight you. You know, I'm not messing with the guy from
Well, I
Indianapolis.
want to, you know, 'cause
Yeah.
Michael in the chat, he's saying like reps who are not trained from scripted approaches are usually chaotic. I think we're all saying, look, you have to have a baseline of what to say. I'm just saying that if you try to script a conversation, which a lot of scripts do, then I think it comes off very, very scripted. That was my only point there.
No, I'm with you. But if you memorize it so well that you don't need it anymore, then you have your bullet points, right? So at least you know you're jumping off points, and then you can still, you know, play a little bit of jazz.
Yeah, and the foot and bolt camps that I'll just add quickly to that, Matt, is that some industries, again, require certification of a message. It's not just learning a message so that we can have consistent competency. It's certification based on some regulation. So
Totally
very common in financial services, very common in a lot of the life sciences field.
Totally agree with that.
I love this. Thank you all three of you, and for everyone who's attended. This has been really incredible, really insightful. I'm excited.
No, it can't be over yet. We're not done.
I can't wait to see. We always pull out nuggets to share on social, and there's definitely been a lot of gold nuggets in this. So thank you all so much. Any parting thoughts before we close out?
I just want to say thanks to everybody that was participating in the chat and then the Q&A. It's awesome to just see everyone talking to each other. It's really cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn, please don't hesitate. Just mention that you met me here.
Yeah, me too.
Likewise, I'd be happy to connect outside with anybody. And I will say, we all know technology cannot solve all this, but don't miss that there are new capabilities in these enablement communication platforms that pick up a lot of what we've said and make it easier, better, and make the sellers much more effective.
Seriously, Bob, I want a demo. I'm reaching out.
Do it. Love to give you a demo.
Thank you so much, everyone. Connect with Bob, Nick, Matt on LinkedIn, and we'll see you next time for another Sales Hacker panel. Thank you, Allego, for sponsoring, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.